Do God have a wife? Okay, let's Google it. Do God have a wife? Now, people say no. In the Bible, it says God never married. According to the Bible, God does not have a wife. The Bible teaches that God has no divine rivals or equals. It is repeatedly condemned in worship of pagan gods. Okay, so who is Asherah? Okay. Asherah is a Canaanite god and mother figure in the Bible, who was worshipped alongside Yahweh in the Temple of Israel. Okay. She was one of the three important goddesses of the Canaanite pantheon and was associated with lions, serpents, and sacred trees. Asherah's primary role was as a mother goddess, and her epithet was probably she who walks on the sea. Okay, so now here it talks about Asherah's cult, right? Called Asherah or Esherim. And it's saying that it was mentioned in the Bible more than 30 times, okay? And it's often shaped like a pole or stylized tree, which were erected by the Israelites throughout their history, especially during the pre-monarchic and divided monarchy periods. Okay, however, the Jewish kings such as King Manasseh and King Josiah destroyed Asherah poles. Okay, so when I read this, I thought of, okay, is it in the Virginia Seal? Yes. So right here, the spear is like a pole, and there's a lot of symbolism I see with that pole or with a tree or the plants like from a tree, right? So let's do maybe state seals. And let's just go to images. My phone is moving slow. But a lot of seals have that pole in it or a tree. Because we know the world is founded and is created, and the world systems, governments were built off of religions. There's a lot of religious symbolism. Spiritual practices around the world. So people have spiritual minds. People have religious minds. They want to believe. People's mind try to figure out the what and whys and hows. You know, that's a natural thing. See? Even the flagpole. That's how that pole, that stick. The spear is a stick. There's a tree there. Trees. People have these religious minds. Because it's part of us rationalizing. Like, for instance, the color magenta. The fuchsia does not exist. Like, that color itself does not exist. Our mind creates it. Is that part of the color spectrum is beyond what we can physically see. So our mind creates it and jumps and makes that connection between like that red and that blue. on one end of the spectrum and the other end of the spectrum, and kind of combines it and make that fuchsia like color. So that's our mind rationalizing. And scientists have already experimented with the mind and did studies and discovered that one part of our brain sees and the other part of our brain rationalizes, tries to figure out what it is that we see and make sense of it. And sometimes it don't even make sense. And you can like check those studies out with like the split brain experiment, where people's corpus callosum, the collection of nerves that connects the right hemisphere to the left hemisphere, is either severed or destroyed in some injury, but they're still alive and they're still able to function. The scientists that studied it, and you can go and watch those experiments, look at the videos of those experiments and read those studies and see what was revealed. Okay, one part of the brain is for reason, and one part of the brain cannot see physically, but reasons and tries to make sense of what's around it, what you're experiencing. And that can have a whole lot to do with religion, right? You want to know, you look up at the sky, you look around, you want to know how things are made, like where it comes from, asking the deeper questions beyond the surface. And so we create stories, humans throughout history, throughout the existence of human on this planet, have made up stories to rationalize, to make sense of the world that we live in. Where did it all come from? How did it start? What are those things out in the sky that you see at night? Why do people act the way they act? You know, we see babies being born, but we see a chain, of human existence and human life, but then we try to go back and where did it all come from? Who were the first humans? Where did the first humans come from? So that's where these ideas of religion and evolution and scientific study and philosophy and all of that comes from. That's where it comes from, the curious mind. People wanting to know, people trying to rationalize and figure this stuff out. And so at one point, what was discovered once people realized the need to get out of their emotions, to stand on top of their emotions and look around. Once the fog was cleared, they looked around and they saw other people in their emotions, different emotional states, right? Not necessarily negative, not saying it's good or bad, but they saw other people in their emotions and acting out of their emotions. So once they controlled their emotions, they didn't stop there. They saw how emotions can be a motivator for people. How you can use your emotions to control yourself. And if a person is not in control of their emotions, someone else can use their emotions to control them. So at some point, spiritual leaders were born. And people said, okay, this person seems to know more than us. They're doing these things, and either they were in support of or they were in fear of. Okay? But either way, at some point, people even learned how to use that fear. Okay? First, people came and they're like, I've discovered this, or this is what I can do. This is what you can do. This is what we can do. And people rejected that because at some point, once people figure it out, there are the people that's on board that's like, yes, we could do this. And then there's the other people that's like, oh, well, if we could do this, if you're coming up with that and you're no different than me, then what makes your idea better than my idea? And maybe I don't want to do that. And then they start rejecting it, or they come up with their own ideas and ways. And whether good or bad, not saying whether it's good or bad, there was just no unity. There was no coming together. So that person that had the super huge, large idea, those people had issues with gathering the other people. Because the other people, at some point, they would listen for a while, and at some point they would realize, hey, I have my own will. I can just go and do whatever else it is that I want to do, because they hadn't controlled their emotions yet. And their emotions maybe says that they don't want to do certain things. They want to do just whatever they want to do. So at some point they will break apart. So some person thought about this, or some group of people thought about this and talked about this, and they said, well, we have to take it outside of ourselves, right? These people are looking up at the skies. They are seeing these things that's happening in nature. And while we are discovering and seeing what's happening in nature and how it could be used, they want to believe that it's some hidden force behind it, that it is the lion in the woods, so to speak, hiding behind that bush. And they're fearful. So maybe we could use that fear so that we can make something great for them. Okay, that's one set of ideas. And then at the other side, there were people who said, yes, you're right, and we can use those ideas to make something great. Would it necessarily be great for them? Who cares? We have these amazing ideas and we can do this amazing thing, and it'll be great to accomplish it and to, feel the feeling of creating what our imaginations thought up. We got to see that this is really real. So, they are lesser minds. They want to believe that is something outside of nature, that is something spooky. So let's use them. They're expendable. Their minds haven't developed. And so then that's where these religions, these spiritual practices, these religions and these orders were birthed out of that over time. Now, all this didn't happen in one day. This happened over the course of hundreds and developed over thousands of years, right? A millennia even, at least two. And now we're coming back around to a point where people are like, hold up, maybe there was some deception behind what this religion thing is all about. Maybe, religion isn't so bad. Maybe it can be used. Maybe it's been used negatively. Maybe we just have to be a bit more careful about how the people are being led with their emotions. And at the same time, make people aware that they're being led with their emotions, since that was the issue from the start, was not having control over your own emotions. I was going to say self-emotions, but a person not having a control over their own emotions. Allowing emotions to be produced in them and then to be led by those emotions. But, okay, so in the process of creating these stories that coincide with actuality, actual existence, real things, real events, real people, or real prototypes of people or societies, there was symbolism, because writing and then, of course, reading had to be developed. So first there were symbols. The symbols were pictures that expressed whole thoughts, ideas, paragraphs. You could take a symbol and create a whole book of meaning out of that one symbol. And then eventually, those symbols were over time evolved into alphabet. And I'm going to type in alphabet symbols over time and see what pops up. Evolution of alphabet. And then those symbols, in order to better have better combinations to combine them to come up with words, so it's better to decode when you go back later to save messages over time, right? The symbols became more focused instead of representing one book or one idea. One symbol now represents a sound, okay? So it went from representing a whole idea that could be like a phrase or a paragraph to representing a thing, a whole thing, like a human or a hand or arm moving versus arm still, to representing the sounds that make up that thing, okay? And it goes along with like how things was named too, right? Like first things was named by the characteristics of it, what people saw in it, or the sounds that it made. You know, like instead of calling a cat was meow. You know what I'm saying? Something like that. It'd be like the sound that that thing made. And those sounds, and sounding out those sounds, you can break that down into syllables. And each of those syllables have sounds. And those sounds are repeated throughout different words and put together to create words and whole ideas. So then we have alphabet. We have individual letters that represent the sounds. And now the sounds are built and put together to form words. And the words, sentences to paragraphs, so forth and so on. To convey messages and ideas. But before and even during the creation of alphabets, or how things evolved to get alphabets, there were pictures. Because think of it, like if you have none of this and you're a human and you're just, existing, and you start communicating and making sounds, and now you want to communicate something or leave a message behind for somebody that's coming later, or when you need to go back and think about it because you realize that you can't hold everything in your head, and you want to write something down or like chip it out in a stone or something. It'll be a picture, right? You could draw the picture of that thing. Take how you see it. It's going into your brain, and then create it. But just because somebody draw what they see don't mean the next one gonna be able to interpret it very well. So really, like, the use of symbols and the evolution of language and everything is an intelligent, very, 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 very intelligent thing that humans came up with. Different cultures over time created these things, ways to communicate. It's very intelligent. But so at some point, people realized that and developed alphabets further. Took symbols that meant one thing, right? And they hid that meaning behind something else and created a different alphabet. A new language. And just like the general public, like the average person wouldn't notice. They would just start talking it, right? Because they just need to communicate and do what they got to do. Create what they need to create, plant what they need to plant, whatever life required of them. They can have food, clothing, shelter. Get along with their families and in their communities and their tribes, right? But there are architects and builders. There are people who philosophize and who think about these things and think about them deeply. And they add on to the thoughts and ideas that other people have had, and they examine them and re-examine them And when the average person is religious, in order to not get so much kickback to intelligent ideas, there's codes and symbolisms that's used to hide messages in plain sight. And so a lot of these symbols go back to religion and spiritual practices, stories that was told in order to give people answers, to control a group of people. And in this sense of control, I'm not saying that it's good or bad, taking good or bad out of it. And we know everything could be used to uplift, to build, and to help, or it can be used to tear down, to drag along, and to destroy, right? It could be used for the betterment of the leader or the group of leaders or the dominant society, like at the peril of the less dominant society, or it could be used to uplift. Either way, it's control. If you are the leader of an organization and you need everybody to work together in harmony and peace and produce what is needed to be produced for that organization, then you have to be able to control the room, control the crowd, control the order of things. Those are all things outside of yourself where control is needed. But first, you have to learn how to control yourself. And in learning how to control yourself, being kind to yourself in the process, empathy is built for others. See, there's the tree, the poles, the trees, and a lot of this symbolism. And we saw that that tree or that pole represents God's wife. Because at one point there was duality. People imagined duality. This great creator, and that's a trip. The Seal of Indiana is chopping down the tree. Ain't that something? 1806. The lumberjack, and they cut out God's wife out of the Bible, not Indiana specifically, but the creators of the Bible and Christianity, they took out God's wife. And they mention it 30 times, mention the name Asherah, 30 times, over 30 times in the Bible. But it's all talking about pagan religions. It's not saying that it's a good thing. It's saying it's a bad thing. So they demonize God's wife and deny that God ever had a wife. So under this new religion of Christianity, God does not have a wife and it doesn't exist. But the ideas and beliefs of God, of a higher deity or a great spirit that this religion of Christianity evolved out of, those religions and beliefs that they borrowed from as they went around, as they traveled around, spreading this belief and using it to control and dominate societies of people. Those beliefs had duality. That masculine spirit God had a feminine spirit God, and they had baby gods. So that in their belief systems, it more directly reflected nature and how we experience the world as people. But they took it outside of themselves to be something great that is beyond our control, that we must submit to, like an acknowledgement that there are greater forces around, right? And sometimes that was the explanation for why we have storms, tornadoes, hurricanes, volcanoes, these great things that the earth is doing that humans can't control, or that it was believed that humans can't control. Now that we know that it's all particles and elements and how these things work, we realize we can control it, and we have been controlling it for a long time without even realizing it. And that control has been damaging. That's all the pollutants and stuff that came with the industrial age, right? People didn't realize that it was being controlled, that it was affecting nature or controlling nature in that way. But now that we know, we got a duty to do something about it and switch that up. But that's where that came from. And that's why God doesn't have a wife in the Bible. Because God got a wife. Somebody was just mad at those religions, or probably got pissed at some woman that was a leader in those religions. And you know how? Okay, so to do that, we would have to go back and look up these different religions, right? There were people who studied these religions. There's people who kept records of these religions. They're in museums and stuff like that. So go back and look up, for instance, Esra. And that was a Hebrew god, and then goddess, and then we can go back even further and see where they got those ideas from. Like, who was the female deity that evolved from, that thought of spiritual practice evolved out of. You take note of who those people were, whether what they named themselves or what maybe a conqueror who came in, what they called them, right? And we can get those two names, and we can look for other things in history that relates to Christianity, right? Like going outside of the Bible, but looking in history, like when the Bible was created, when it was written, who used these things before it was written, who went around talking about these spiritual practices, what conflicts did this group of people or nation of people have with these other nations of people, who won in that war, right? Because usually it's always some battle. You have a group of people coming in trying to take over the land. The people don't want to be taken over, They already have that thing set up. So then there's war. And then there's people are dying. So at some point they come up with the religion, and they're like, hey, they believe in this spirituality. So let me come and talk to you about this, these spiritual things. And let me convince you that you've had it wrong. Let me tell you your pain point, and then let me give you the solution, right? Let me tell you, I got the thing, I got the thing that can make it better. But then there were some people who still reject it because they're like, hold on, this is, my God says this anyway. So, I don't know where you're getting this from, who you sent in here to study our religion so that you could come with this stuff. Or, maybe you got it from the neighboring community who have similar beliefs as us. You know what I'm saying? Like, all of this stuff is recorded in history. And you can go back and see where it came from and how these thoughts and ideas evolved over time, how they was accepted. And a lot of Christianity was forced on people because they went in not just with these ideas, because they knew that these ideas could control a group of people more easily, right? Than using logic. They can use spirituality. But they also had to back that up by carrying a big stick. Okay, they had to have some force behind it too. So they're like, look, we're bringing this religion and we gonna beat you up, we go plummet, we go destroy, we gonna kill all y'all until somebody decides to submit. Unless we gotta wipe y'all out, then we just take your land and we have babies and spread out and bring the people from the last place that we conquered, that we carrying around as slaves that's doing our physical labor for us. And we just gonna build up here. And that's how the religion was spread Like, that's literally how the religion was spread, even through, monarchies. And then now they're like, okay, well, this whole country has to be founded on these principles and ideas. And these principles and ideas was the religious beliefs or morals that was set up around the religion. And then even going into Christianity itself, different places said, no, we have a different form of Christianity. We don't believe those things that you believe. And as they're perfecting the religion, as they are kind of niching down, I guess, and like getting it straight and exact, the religious practices, a couple of them got together and they came up with these principles, and they're like, okay, these are the things that we believe as Christians. Okay, so now if you are to become a Christian, if you're to rule a nation under the banner of Christianity, these are the things that you have to agree to. But then there was some, like the Orthodox Christians, who did not believe in those things. And they're like, hold on, we were brought this religion earlier, and now you're coming back after you done went off and took it and transformed it. Now you're coming back and representing it to us with these other principles, but we don't believe in exactly those things. So then you have the different Christian groups, the different branches of Bible believers, right? And some accept these principles, some sign the agreement and say, okay, we operating under these things. And then there's some that don't. Like the Orthodox, for instance, like Ethiopians. And Ethiopia is not the only ones that practice Orthodox Christianity or a different form of Christianity other than like what's under Catholicism and stuff like that. But that's how it branches off. But then like the average person, you're born into it, you hear these key phrases and words, or verses from the Bible, and you think it's all the same or it's all believed the same, but it's not. It was a whole evolution. And these symbols, you think it's something different in history, but it's all the same things. It's these symbols. So then when the state is formed, you have a group of people to get together, a group of leaders in that state. And even in the city, once cities started to be formed, and they get together in nations, on every scale, they got these seals. And in the seals is a whole lot of symbolism. And these are the principles, these are the things that they are founded on. And it's all connected back to religion and spiritualities, and they all tell stories about the battle of these different groups that believe differently. And so in a lot of these symbolisms, a lot of these seals, they tell you that it was something older. They let you know that while now they may demonize it or be against those practices, they still pay reverence in some way, even if it's a disrespectful way. They're paying reverence, and they're letting those that can see and understand know that there was something else. There was some deeper relationship between these thoughts and ideas and these religions and these groups of people who held these different ideas and beliefs. And it's always the cap on the stick. Sometimes it's the cap on the person's head, but that's the freedom cap. And it's usually on a stick, and that stick seems to represent Asherah, or God's wife, that was chopped down or killed or taken out of the Bible. But they put it in the symbolism. They put a cap of freedom on it. Trees grow freely. Trees don't need you to do nothing. They was here before humans was here. And they was grown without the help of humans. So if a tree is representing this goddess, this feminine deity, feminine energy, or a woman, and they are putting the cap on her, this is the representing freedom that has to be given, is a whole ceremony that's surrounding it. How is freedom ordained? How is freedom given? When you're born with it. But they give freedom. That's a whole other way of control. (1776), the Great Seal of the State of North Carolina. Yeah, the woman here with the toga on. And look, she has one shoulder off too. She's holding the Constitution, and she has the freedom stick. She has the stick with the freedom head on it. And the other woman here over the harvest. Agriculture, holding the wheat. One Man's Tale of the Great Seal of North Carolina. Let's go to this and see what's up with this. Hey, I'm going to do a little talking and walking and researching while I'm walking my dog for a second. So you might hear some different sounds in the background. When I was Chief Deputy Attorney General of the North Carolina 1970s, our office received hold on, wait, buddy. Wait. Okay, I'm going to pause this because I can barely see with the sun's glare, and I'll be back. Okay. There we go. Sometime later, I had business at the legislative building and found myself walking across a huge image of the state seal in front of the building. To my horror, the huge image that untold numbers of North Carolinians had walked over and assumed was the official seal had no ship on it, representing the eastern portion of the state where I'm from, rather than the sea portion of mountains to the sea. Further investigation found numerous variations of the seal. And you see the seal now, it's just a woman with the stick with the head. And she also has a cap on her head. In addition to the ship, another recurring difference I noticed was in one of the female figures depicted on the seal. I asked Deputy Attorney General Ralph Moody then dean of all state lawyers and a source of all sorts of information and wisdom about the lady. She represents liberty. Liberty. Moody told me the pole topped with the cap was a symbol of freedom, originally a mark of defiance by escaped Roman slaves. Originally a mark of defiance. So if you put the cap on the head, then that means that they were free outside of the order. They took their own freedom and they were in defiance. That had been popularized in the American Revolution. So that's why some slaves had that cap on. Because those were the ones that were in defiance, that wasn't going along to get along. That took their own freedom and said, this don't make sense. So they gave them that cap as a mark of defiance. And then it ends up being put into ceremonies. Okay, let's finish. Let me finish reading. Moody explained they were corruptions of the original. Okay, but I asked, how about all the versions? How about all the various versions of the seal I have seen her wearing a cap and displaying a cap on her staff? Moody explained that they were corruptions of the original. We concluded that the only way to settle the matter was to draft a statute that described quite explicitly the official Great Seal of the state of North Carolina, have it passed by the General Assembly, and then file a copy that conformed with the description that the Secretary of State Okay. Okay, back in my office, I sat down to draft the description. Bob Scott was governor then, and he had commissioned as sovereign large ashtrays, as souvenirs, large ashtrays with his signature on the bottom of them. And I guess that's what that is right there. The signature on the bottom of it and the state seal on the front. I picked up my ashtray, sitting on my desk, and by golly, it matched in every detail of what my notion of the seal would be. The mountains were on the left, the oceans and the ship were on the right. Representation of freedom was in the middle. Bareheaded, with her slave's cap hanging from her staff. And Plenty, the second figure, that was Plenty, was sitting with her arms extended towards Liberty, holding 3 heads of grain in her right hand and her left hand, and in her left hand a small end of a horn. So now, what is the symbolism of the right and the left hand? Is my next question. And then also the issue with the symbolism of the grain and the horn. But she is the goddess of plenty, so my first guess will be that it has something to do with agriculture and food. So immediately one of the messages that it's saying to me is, you free to eat. You free to plant seeds and reap harvest. There you go. All right, let's go back. All right, so I'm gonna end it right there. Recap a couple things that we learned today. God's got a wife. There's a whole evolution to religion, religious beliefs. And there's a way you can go and check that out and see where it came from and why these ideas are overlapping and are similar and where they came from. The freedom cap was originally a symbol of defiance, of slave defiance. And the tree and the poles represents God's wife, Asherah or Ashram. And the North Carolina seal seems to be a symbolism of harvest extending itself, and harvest and plenty extending itself to freedom.